Good evening, and I hope everybody enjoyed the music, pomp and circumstance. Yay, graduation! Big. It's a huge cake. It's enormous. Yeah. So congratulations to all who are graduating tonight. Please stay, enjoy cake community, and everyone see Patty Joe for your diplomas and your lapel pins. We also want to say we have greatly appreciated our presenters for this year. They've been amazing. As thrilled as we are to be graduating, we have an enthralling presentation tonight. It's called Danger in the Air, which is a discussion of health risks from airborne toxins. Tonight's esteemed presenter is Dr. Kelet Robinson, MD. Dr. Kelet Robinson is a family physician who's practiced in Colorado for over 20 years. Prior to that, she earned a medical degree from Louisiana State University and completed a residency at the University of Arizona. She enjoys providing full spectrum outpatient medicine and teaching the next generation of learners. In fact, she's with the Department of Family Medicine here on campus and a great preceptor and attending to our students. When she's not at work, you can find her checking out a new restaurant or reading a novel. Please, and by the way, I'm so sorry I can't stay tonight. I have a 6 a.m. call, but please welcome Dr. Robinson and enjoy.
Hey, hi everyone. Can you hear me up there? Yeah. Perfect. So, danger in the air, risk of airborne toxins, as you've just heard. I'm going to start this off just with a couple of basic definitions. So air pollution, as we all know, is contamination of the indoor or outdoor environment by chemical, physical, or biological agent, as opposed to an air toxin, which are pollutants that are known or suspected to cause serious health effects. And we are focusing more on the air toxins today, the things that we know can harm us. So one of the things I learned when I started putting this lecture together is that there's not a whole lot of consistency as to the nomenclature around this. There are noxious gases, there are poisonous metals, there are particles. I created my own little system just because I wanted it to be a little bit more clear. So we're going to have 3 topics that we have broken down the airborne toxins into. There's noxious gases, I have a few of those listed there. Particles. So the particles can be biologics, which are things like molds in your home. Metals, again, I mentioned lead, and we all know the harms of lead, and there's a lot of testing around that now. Building materials, which is an interesting thing. So all of those new things in your home can have dangerous toxins associated, and then volatile organic compounds. So what happens when you're exposed to noxious gases? A lot of the noxious gases are water soluble. And so what happens is that those parts of your body that are moist cause a lot of the symptoms. And you can have watery eyes, wheezing, burning throat. So all of those kind of watery parts of your body will start to have the symptoms first. In severe cases, you can actually have acute respiratory distress syndrome, where you get a lot more damage. So looking at this, watery eyes, coughing, wheezing, burning throat, I'm going to have a first question here. If you're considering that exposure to noxious gases cause those symptoms, what do you think would be the best first step in treatment, just knowing this? Would it be A, to hydrate? B, would you need some antibiotics? C, would you need a few steroids to decrease inflammation? Or D, should you leave and consider the error of your ways? Okay. Anyone disagree with that A? So the answer is to leave and reconsider the error of your ways. The best treatment for exposure to a noxious gas is to just get away from it. And in some ways you can consider that those symptoms, the watery eyes, the burning throat, as good, because those are signs your body is telling you, hey, this isn't good for me. I need to leave. So what happens if you are a little kid who lives across from the Suncor plant? What happens if you live in one of those communities that are sometimes called sacrifice zones? So your home is there. You can't leave and go relax under a nice tree. What if your job is working out in a field all day and that's how you make money for your family? These are your high-risk groups. Another thing to consider is, what if you live in one of those areas? You're a little kid, you go to school, you enjoy playing outside most of the day. You like soccer, you like basketball. You're a high-risk group. Children are especially at risk also just because of their anatomy. So they have smaller lungs, more of that toxin into a smaller space, and also children breathe faster than adults. So imagine this, you're a small child being exposed to those toxins. You enjoy playing outside. Playing outside makes you breathe a lot faster because you're getting all pumped up. So one of the highest risk groups there. And then it starts to make sense when you remember back on all of those news stories where it says that kids who live in these areas have a higher risk of reactive airway disease or asthma. So short-term high-intensity exposures are more likely to lead to that. You're just irritating your lungs over and over and over again every day. I threw this couple of x-rays up there. It's one of those like famous med school pictures, I think. Like no one gets out without seeing this. This is ARDS over on it's going to be your left, where you see what we sometimes call whiteout of lungs. So there's just white. You don't really see that nice black airspace. That can sometimes happen with a big exposure. So one of those industrial accidents where suddenly a lot of toxins go out into the air and you're breathing in a bunch of them. So this can sometimes, it tends to happen really quickly. So you're exposed and this starts to happen, but it can be delayed out for a day or so. And it sometimes is fatal. If you're able to get to treatment, get the medication, get on a ventilator sometimes, that will be helpful, but it is often fatal. Okay, so we talked about noxious gases and that noxious gas exposure. The noxious gases are specific components of those emissions. So we're talking about nitrous oxide, sulfuric acid, those specific components. Ozone is smog. It's another word for smog. And it's what happens when all of those pollutants mix together and are exposed to sunlight. Exposure to high levels of outdoor pollution leads to increased levels of respiratory and cardiac problems, increased emergency department visits, increased hospital admission, and increased mortality. This is something that we've known for a very long time, actually. How long, you say? So I found this a little bit interesting and maybe morbidly amusing when I was looking up some interesting facts for the slides. So in 1930, in this little valley in Belgium, the valley was an industrial area. They had a 3-day weather inversion where thousands of people suddenly got sick and about 63 of them died. In the United States, 1948, a 2-day smog. So we just talked about smog, that ozone, that thick smoke versus fog that sits over the city. A bunch of people became ill. 22 of them suddenly died. In Mexico, 22 deaths, a bunch of hospitalizations. And then there's the Great London Smog that some of you may have heard of. A 5-day weather inversion. So what's a weather inversion? Temperature should be cooler at the bottom and rise. If that temperature flips so that the air doesn't rise as it's expected, the smog sits. And so ozone in the atmosphere creates a nice, safe blanket. It keeps the things in that are supposed to be in, keeps the things out that are supposed to be out. If there's a weather inversion, that ozone layer doesn't get to where it's supposed to be, and it sits, becomes very dangerous. This was thought to have come from sulfur dioxide being produced in coal plants. So London was an industrial area. They were very proud of this. They were making a lot of money. 4,000 people died in the immediate aftermath of that 5-day period. Probably about 12,000 people died in the year that followed. The good thing, this is out of order. So the good thing that came out of this is that these huge situations, and these were not all of them, there were a bunch of them that occurred, a bunch of weather inversions where suddenly a bunch of people died, and folks were smart enough even back then to go, hey, you know, smog sits here and a bunch of people die. This is probably not a good thing. Finally, we had the Environmental Protection Act. So these things are kind of what triggered all of that to happen. And it took a while. It took a lot of this happening because what happens in industrial areas? People make money. And so the laws weren't passed for a long time. When the laws were passed, they weren't really enforced because in industrial areas, people have jobs and people make money. Oops, am I going backwards? Here we go. All right. Thank you. Another one of those noxious gases is radon. Radon is invisible, odorless, naturally occurring. It is everywhere outside, all around us. We cannot get rid of it. It's a radioactive gas found in the soil, in rock, and frequently in water. One of the breakdown products of uranium. It gets into buildings. Every single building has radon inside it because it comes in through the floors, through the foundation, through the cracks in the walls. It is heavier than air, so it tends to settle more in the lower levels. Basements, first floors of homes and buildings tend to have more radon. It is also the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. The EPA recommends mitigation steps for radon levels over 4 picocuries. So how many people here have had their homes tested for radon? All right, excellent. Who in here thinks they know what that picocurie is named after, who that is named after? Yeah. You are wrong. It is named after Madame Curie's husband, Pierre, because sexism. So this was meant to be a video. I don't think it's actually going to play, but what it shows is the particles going up from the foundation, from the rocks there into the house. And what you can see is that they're more concentrated in the basement. There are less of them on the second floor. And if the video would play, you'd see them slowly rising, but never getting to high levels at that top. You would also see the father kind of standing up, and you would see his lung inflammation. So the way we think this works is that the radon is a radioactive element. So it's a breakdown product of uranium. We breathe it in. It continues to break down. It's radioactive. And so you have a radioactive process ongoing in your lungs. Some of the breakdown products are also radioactive, and those cause damage. And those little spots of damage are more likely to become cancerous over the course of time. Goodness, okay. It's been a long time. In the early 1900s, people realized uranium was causing cancer because coal miners were getting it at higher levels. Probably even before then, people were starting to realize that the coal breakdown was causing some kind of reaction to increase the risk of cancer. It really got got linked to radon because of Stanley Watrous in the United States. Oddly enough, all over the world, there were maybe 3 or 4 different people who at about the same time made this discovery of linking radon to this increased risk of cancer. Stanley Watrous was a gentleman who got a new job at a nuclear plant. And so as part of their safety structure, he had to wear this little thing every time he went into the building to measure his radiation level. One day, he comes in, he sets off all the alarms at his new job at the nuclear facility. And everyone's like, hey, what's going on? See, the interesting thing is that plant had not yet opened. There was no uranium on site. And so they had to kind of follow Mr. Watrous around and figure out what was going on. He had extremely high levels of radon in his home. Let's see, what was I going to say? So those I talked about. It takes about 20 years probably to lead to cancer exposure. All right. Okay, I just forgot my thought. Let's move on. Here's my thought. It was in his home, which was in Pennsylvania. So who here has heard of the 3 Mile incident? Yeah. So 1978, a nuclear power plant has malfunctioned. The second cooling component just stops working. And so one of the reactors melts. Radioactive gas gets released. Bad thing for those workers, bad thing for the community. The plant ends up making a $25 million payout over that. It's touted as like the most serious nuclear accident in the country, even though afterwards it's determined that the amount of radiation released really was not that much over baseline. It was just kind of a heavily radioactive area, as we know from Mr. Watrous. Here is an interesting thing. Sorry, I keep going backwards. Let's talk about the Church Rock incident of 1979. So about the same time period, a little bit after, nuclear disposal pond. So this is, it's one of those areas designed to catch the runoff from the nuclear plant. This is in a Navajo reservation. The excess nuclear material runs off into the water. No one actually tells the residents what happened for a few days. Once they're told, they only get told in English. All of the materials provided to them are in English. A lot of the people there don't speak English. They were not allowed any federal aid. They did not get a $25 million payout. I actually don't have my notes here. They got, I believe, around $500,000 as a payout for all of this. This was actually the worst nuclear accident in American history. 3 times as much radiation was released in that area. It's never really been completely cleaned. So who's heard of the Church Rock incident? I threw this up just because I found it interesting as to the protective gear these people have. These are men from the Navajo reservation working in one of the uranium mines. This is the 1950s. I mentioned a couple of slides earlier. Early 1900s, we knew that this was dangerous. We knew that working in these mines caused cancer. In the other mines that were not on Navajo reservations, they were required to have protective gear. They were required to have ventilation systems that were not present here. This is what protective gear looks like. So, who has higher radon risk? Areas that have dry soil, soil that tends to crack, thin soil, soil that's on a slope, Places with a lot of coal deposits, granite, limestone. Colorado is a high radon area. Surprise, surprise. Probably about half the homes in Colorado are considered to have high radon levels. And I was actually chatting with someone before this talk started. I grew up in Mississippi. I never really heard of radon test when I was growing up. I heard about it when I came here and started looking at houses. A lot of native lands are high-risk areas because so many of the places on or near the reservations were available for uranium mining. And once that kind of nuclear boom was over, the companies just pulled out and left. They didn't properly close and clean the mines. They left. Okay. What is the best first step to reduce lung cancer risk from radon exposure? A, test your home for radon. B, add a radon mitigation system. C, remove large rocks from the immediate vicinity of your home. Or D, take supplemental vitamin D, about 400 international units per day. Hey, you guys rocked that one, didn't you? You can get these tests just about anywhere for about $20. You can get them at Home Depot. You can order them off Amazon, of course. All right, on to particulate matter. So particulate matter are chemicals that come from burning things. There's a delineation of particulate matter and fine particulate matter. Fine particulate matter are those particles that measure 2.5 microns or less in diameter. Those fine particulate matter account for most of the health effects due to air pollution. So associated with all of these risks, increased asthma, neurological disorders, psychological disorders, there's more depression and anxiety. Studies show increased risk of attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum, increased dementia, increased stroke. It is also the second most frequent cause of stroke after high blood pressure. We don't really know why. Maybe those particles increase the inflammation around your blood vessels, but no one really understands how that works. So fine particulate matter, typically the particulate matter, they measure in the 10 micromoles, 2.5, and then there's the ultrafine sometimes that's less than 1. This is a cross-section of a strand of hair, some beach sand over there, just for reference. And then the particulate matter, the fine particulate matter, about 1/35 the diameter of a strand of hair. Teeny tiny pieces there. Here is why smaller particles are more dangerous. The big particles get to a certain spot in the lung and really can't travel much more. The smaller particles can get deeper into the lung. And then those really small particles can get all the way through, cause a lot of damage. And this is another one of those kind of medical principles, Frick's law of diffusion. So the more surface area you have, the more things can get through. And if you get, let's see, where's my little pointer? You can get down here, look at all of that surface area compared to over there. It seems that fine particulate matter can actually cross the blood-brain barrier to damage nerve tissue. It's kind of a big deal. The body works really hard to keep things away from the brain. But fine particulate matter gets in there. This is a picture taken from a research article done by a group in Birmingham, United Kingdom, showing fine particulate matter that has gotten into the blood vessels of the brain. There is some thought that fine particulate matter doesn't even need blood to cause damage in the brain. You can breathe this in. It gets here into the olfactory bulb and has a direct pathway. Two studies here. The 6-city study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1993. It was the first time that a research group was able to directly link fine particulate matter with mortality. And after that, there were a lot of people who doubted it and said, is that really a link? How do you know? 2023, this is a second study. The same group combined with another group of researchers. What they found was that after those environmental mediations went into place, after the government came along and said, hey, you know, the Environmental Protection Agency is here now, you have to clean things up, you have to be accountable for the pollution your company is putting out into the environment, mortality decreased. So the second study, they were able to link those changes to longer lifespan. And they were actually also able to go back and show that not only was there an increase in mortality when you had more exposure to air pollution, fine particulate matter, there was more than a 2 times increased risk if that fine particulate matter came from burning coal. Okay. Home stretch. The last thing here, the last little subdivision, volatile organic compounds. These are gases emitted from liquids or solids that vaporize at or around room temperature. So things like paint, cleaning supplies, some furniture, and things you can smell. That new furniture scent you have, or when you get new drapes, new carpet, you know, that smell that, yeah, those are volatile organic compounds. And so new products are actually a bit more dangerous as far as pollution goes. It kind of fades out over time with the smell. So another time when maybe your body is helping you out by going like, yeah, maybe you step away from that. It's not so good for you. Okay, so we have talked a lot about pollution. There's that outside pollution, you have noxious gases, you have smog, you have indoor pollution because there is radon in all of the buildings. You close the windows and the radon stays in, so there's, you know, there are higher levels in the winter and hot days on the summer. You lock it all in. About 7 million deaths each year from pollution combined. Most of the world's population is breathing air that exceeds the healthy pollution levels defined by the World Health Organization. And there's evidence that suggests there are more indoor air pollutants than outdoor air pollutants. So where exactly is safe? What are you supposed to do? There was kind of an interesting study about indoor air pollution, where they were trying to prove whether or not there were any acute effects and how much it mattered. So they did this very nice kind of double-blind study. They had people come in without scents, and then they had people come in and they exposed them to things like open expo markers. spray scents in the air. And they let them go about their normal day doing their work, and found that people with these indoor air exposures were not as productive. They had more difficulty concentrating. They had more difficulty doing computations. There was indeed a risk there. All right, toxic gases in homes. Most of the toxic gases in your home actually come, again, from burning things. So gas stoves, cigarettes. Honestly, these days, if you smoke, just don't. And that, I guess that sounds trite. I know it's a very difficult habit to stop. Here's some stuff blowing in from outdoors. There's your furniture wax, fresh paint. They have a chimney. A little sick kid over here throwing out some biological toxins. All right. E-cigarettes, you don't get a medical talk without getting away from smoking risk. E-cigarettes have not been around that long, about a decade. And so there's still a lot of question about how dangerous they are, if they are a lot more dangerous than tobacco cigarettes. A lot of people do use them to stop regular smoking, and they actually seem to be effective for that if you can switch 100% from the tobacco traditional cigarettes to an e-cigarette. However, these e-cigarettes also produce volatile organic compounds and ultrafine particulate matter. And you can, oops, please, let's go back up. You can see her polluting the air right here. So there is the risk of secondhand smoke exposure. A lot of people say that they use e-cigarettes so that they don't annoy other people around them with the smell. But there does seem to be a significant secondhand smoke exposure risk. All right, what can you do? So there's danger indoors, there's danger outdoors. Some things you can do. If there's a poor air quality day, you stay inside, if you're able to stay inside. You can wear a mask if you need to be outside or you just have plans to spend time outside. The K95 and NK95 mask are the best. And I found this out actually just recently, that 95 means that in ideal situations in a lab, they keep out 95% of the toxins. Surgical masks are good for about 70%. So if you don't have a K95, a surgical mask is not so bad. A cloth mask, if you want to throw a bandana on, those probably keep out 20 or 30%. You can open a window if it's a good air quality day, let some of those radon particles leave. You can use an air purifier, especially one of the HEPA air purifiers. You can switch your workouts to the morning if you tend to go outside and take a jog. The air is just a little bit cleaner in the morning before people get on the road and start driving, before plants open. Use an exhaust fan when cooking. And the studies show that if you're cooking, even if you're boiling water, if you click on that exhaust fan, it's really helpful in decreasing the noxious gas risk. Don't use air deodorizers. Find particulate matter all over the place. Change all of your filters regularly. So your appliance filters, your furnace filters, all of those. Winterize your home to decrease the need for turning on the air conditioner and the furnace. Use apps. There are a lot of them, very easily available. So download something on your phone that lets you know if the air quality outside is really poor and you should try not to spend. If you have the option of not spending the day outside, try to not spend the day outside. Test for radon, which you all do, yay. And there are a few studies that show maybe taking some supplements like omega-3 and vitamin E can be helpful. Those are still being investigated, but studies show that they may just be helpful. Okay. I ran through that faster than I thought I would. Any questions?
Okay, it's question time. We're gonna start with a question from the audience and then move to a question from our chat. Does anybody in the audience have a question?
I do have a question.
Huh.
For the people that vape,
Mhm.
is the liquid in the vape, does that cause more damage in the lung than just smoking?
So the liquid in the vape seems to, and again, they've only been around for about a decade. It's a volatile organic compound. It seems to be safer than traditional smoking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have any in the chat. Sure you don't have any? Oh, we have one here and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Thank you for your talk. You mentioned to use air purifiers. There have been some conversation about using plants. Are there
Yes.
any recommended plants that you would suggest for air purifying indoors?
You know, I had a slide about that in this, and then I removed it just because it seems to still be a little bit unclear about that. So a lot of people, a lot of the studies show that having plants around is quite helpful. I saw at least one little informational where they were saying even kind of empty buckets of dirt where your plant is no longer growing may be helpful for purifying the air, but there is not, I didn't see like good consensus on there. And so I just kind of pulled it out, which is interesting because definitely like the plants outside are helpful. Yeah.
So you were talking about replacing your filters like regularly?
Yeah.
Would you recommend like waiting until like the expiration date? Or would you recommend like changing them on a certain schedule no matter what the package says?
I would recommend changing them on a schedule, no matter what the package says. And so if you talk to a lot of contractors around here, they will say like buy the cheapest possible filter and then just change it a lot rather than buying those really fancy ones that say you can leave them in for 6 months.
Hi, Dr. Robinson. I have a question in the chat. Is there any legislation that's preventing oil and gas refineries near neighborhoods?
None that I know of. You guys know. And I don't know a whole lot about the active legislation. Anyone know of anything that's preventing? I don't think. It would be wonderful if there were that type of legislation. I don't know anything. And, you know, I mentioned the sacrifice neighborhoods. Often what happens is that the people who have more money and more power will keep plants away from their neighborhoods. But, and that just means that the plants get moved over to other neighborhoods where the people are not able or willing to complain as much, or where their complaints are not recognized as much. There's also kind of one point I forgot to mention when I was chatting about radon. So the levels that are recommended are less than 4 microcuries, if you kind of look on any of the websites. The way we got that number is kind of a curious thing. So the way we got that number is that when it was chosen at the time, it was thought that it was fairly easy for anyone to do some type of mitigation in their home and get radon levels lower than 4. It's not a safe level. Like there's not a level that's considered safe. That was chosen because they're like, hey, we'll give everyone something to do. And it's easy to get the number below 4. Lower is better. The mitigation systems are also better. So there's been a lot of talk about recommending getting the number down to 2. And
All right.
My son was told he could not use an N95 mask at work unless he was certified to wear one. Is that true?
Well, I guess that depends on where he works. It shouldn't be true. The mask will improve the safety. They'll improve your risk from airborne toxins. So as a physician, I know that often when you start working at a hospital or a new facility, they will make you go in for an N95 fitting. And you don't get to wear that mask until you go somewhere and they say, hey, you have the proper mask and it's properly fitted. What we all know from COVID, although there's like going to be some dissension there, but what we kind of know from COVID too is that wearing a mask is better than not wearing a mask. So if you have an N95 that is not properly fitted for you, you are still greatly improving your risk. And maybe you're not removing 95% of the particles because it's not that ideal laboratory situation, but you're getting pretty darn close.
C. How bad can secondhand smoke from vaping or vape residue around the house be?
So the studies with vaping show that there's fine particulate matter produced from vaping, and then there are the volatile organic compounds. Fine particulate matter produced from vaping is just as bad as tobacco smoke, and there's a lot of those fine and very fine particles produced. So there's a lot of damage there from the households. I mentioned the volatile organic compounds. Those seem to not be as bad as traditional cigarettes, but they are still quite dangerous. And when I said that vaping is better than traditional, I was not saying that vaping is the way to go. It's not good for you by any means. But there are people who truly use vaping to stop traditional smoking. And there was a lot of controversy about doing that for a long time. Studies show that people who use it to switch over and use it as like a 100%, I'm no longer smoking traditional cigarettes, I'm only going to vape until I'm able to quit, there are increased levels of people who quit doing that. So that's maybe kind of the one silver lining for vaping. But I am not recommending it to anyone.
C. Besides proper ventilations within homes and ceiling cracks, are there any other tips you can provide?
Against radon specifically, or just yeah. Okay, so really the recommendations going indoor air pollution versus outdoor air pollution is to try to get away from the most polluted area. So if it is a high smog day, you're going to close your windows, you're going to stay inside. If it is a beautiful day, you open all of your windows, you let all of the toxins that are in your house escape. There are radon mitigation systems that work very well. There are a bunch of them. I don't understand those systems very well, but you can actually get pumps that kind of pull the air from the bottom of your house and send it out into the environment. So radon specifically, once it is out of the house, those levels drop off really quickly. So once it's just pumped to the outside, it's fine. And with radon, of course, we all walk around, and as I mentioned, it's everywhere. It's in the rocks, it's in the soil. You don't really worry about radon pollution if you're outside sitting under a tree or enjoying a picnic. You worry about radon pollution in your house when you're in that enclosed space and it's building up.
Is there a difference in the small particulate matter smoking marijuana versus tobacco?
I do not know the answer to that. That is a very specific question. I don't know. I wonder why you want to know that.
I have a follow-up question about coal and uranium. So you talked both about both the sources and the pollution that they causes. energy is something that we continue to use and we have more demand now than before. Which one is a safer alternative considering the harms from both of them?
So if you're talking only about the risk to your lungs, the uranium is probably safer, again, because it breaks down to radium, which breaks down to radon. And the issue is that you're breathing it in, that if you breathe it in, that breakdown process continues and you can have lung cancer. However, that one dissipates very quickly and easily in the air. The studies that I mentioned, that the 6-city study and the follow-up study specifically showed that exposure to coal breakdown products seems to be worse. Like there's a higher mortality risk with that coal breakdown. Don't really know why. It seems to just break down into dirtier stuff. So breathing in the coal smoke right now, from what we know, is more dangerous than the other toxins.
Any more questions from the audience? All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Robinson. It was wonderful having you
Thank you.
here.